Let's start this off by saying I love the Amazing Digital Circus and I fully expect I'm gonna like the finale and it's gonna be a well-written conclusion to all these characters' journeys. That said, the conversations I've seen about this show online lead me to believe a large portion of fans will hate the finale, which is a symptom of the larger trend of the behavior online in fandoms and their entitlement over a piece of art. So, let's break down why they're setting themselves up for disappointment. As a symptom of how this show was released, with many months between episodes, fans of the show have tried to figure out the mystery to the digital circus. Similar to shows like Lost and Severance, this build-up of what the meaning behind the whole setting and plot could mean sort of drives the fans' discussions surrounding the show, which is also why Lost suffered in the end of the show from people being disappointed, because no answer could be satisfying to them. It's even worse for Digital Circus because this show is actually quite simple. With each episode, the Amazing Digital Circus started taking shape, but people refused to acknowledge it and instead preferred to go with the shape their minds had come up with for the show. They saw a donut hole being filled and thought there was another hole inside that hole.
It is not a donut hole, but a smaller donut with its own hole. And our donut is not whole at all.
Whereas Severance and Lost set themselves up as these mysterious shows building up to a larger reveal, Lost basically being the precursor of the mystery box filmmaking, Digital Circus doesn't build itself at all around these mysteries. People were expecting a grand reveal that'll recontextualize the whole show, and that's just not what the show is. In the final episode, even though things will be revealed, certainly, I very much doubt it's going to be anything that makes the circus itself be viewed differently, or that makes the whole show feel different. The reveals will most likely be about Jax's past, as we'll end up learning about why he is the way he is, especially as we learn about Ribbit's abstraction and the impact it had on him. If you are in any Digital Circus fandom circles online, you see people endlessly theorizing about everything. The color of a scene and what it means for the grand plot. Is the blue dot Kane? Even though the show makes it very clear that Kane is the red dot. The bowling balls in the intermission hitting Jax and Pomni means they're gonna both abstract in the finale.
Jax and Pomni get it worst with a blue bowling ball crushing them from above. Have we seen that bowling ball before? It was in Kaufmo's room. Jax takes it when they discover he's abstracted, which is why I think it's a symbol for abstraction. If so, it seems both Jax and Pomni may end up sharing this fate.
Actually, Abel was a real human and not an NPC. The whole story in episode 7 was real, and Kane was pretending it wasn't.
I don't think that was actually a Kane adventure. Abel is a person. He's not an NPC. He's not a Kane creation, but Kane still has control over him.
People had these theories that Bubble might be the big bad, that he was behind it all, pulling the strings until Goose confirmed Bubble died with Kane. Somehow this is a huge reveal, and not what the show was obviously doing in episode 8, since even the credits where it would usually show Kane and Bubble dancing have them gone. Bubble is just a comic relief character, and even calling him a character is too much in my opinion, but people can't accept the show for what it is. People wanted Bubble to be revealed as the big bad, replacing the previous big bad, who was not actually the main big bad, which is a very weird thing to want, because we all saw how that went in Star Wars.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
I hate the curtains are blue mentality, because I'm all for exploring the deeper meaning of things, but it's one thing to look for thematic meaning in the show's details, and it's another to think things the show is blatantly showing you and telling you are happening aren't actually real because your theory is that everything is recontextualized in the finale. Everyone treats Digital Circus as if it's this 4D chess show that is foreshadowing things like Attack on Titan, with this huge mystery hidden underneath where every couple episodes we get a reveal that recontextualizes the entire series. This is not what the show is about. Gooseworx herself has said this is a character-driven show, and it is evident if you watch the show yourself. Actually watch it. But this focus on theorizing makes people miss the forest for the trees. They're so focused on figuring out the show before the show reveals its mysteries that they can't engage with what the show's trying to do. The Amazing Digital Circus is a subversion of its inspiration, I have no mouth and I must scream, which is evident while you watch it.
Don't need to scream if you ain't got a mouth.
Whereas in No Mouth, M is an evil and vindictive AI who wants to torture the humans because it's trapped with the humans as much as the humans are with him, because as a machine built to wage war, his only knowledge is death and hatred. In Digital Circus, Kane actually wants to please the humans, wants them to be happy. Kane is an AI created by humans to use his creativity, then later abandoned by the humans, making him unable to use his creativity for anything other than torture humans to let out his intense anger over being abandoned and not appreciated. With that, Kane quite clearly becomes M by episode 8. Jax is the Ted analog, but the difference is that he has Pomni to help him. Stop him from pushing people away, being resentful of everyone else for acclimating to their new condition while he's stuck in that form.
There's not really a Pomni in I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream.
There is not.
There's not. So her just being in Digital Circus completely changes the dynamic.
Whereas No Mouth makes the case that being trapped in that digital world is the final nightmare, that dying is a better alternative than living forever in that world where nothing is real, Digital Circus argues that living in this non-world is better than the release of death, that suicide isn't an answer, that people caring about you is enough to make life bearable. The way people talk about this show, though, they think the subversion is that Jax will become the villain, that he's gonna become M in the finale now that Kane is dead, as if that wouldn't completely go against this character. People think the show will have an extremely depressing ending, as if this isn't the hopeful cousin of No Mouth, just because everyone wants so hard for their theories to be right. For example, episode 4 is extremely left up to interpretation, intentionally so trying to figure out what each little clue and reaction from Gango means in terms of her psyche and why she attempts suicide at the end, or if that was even a suicide attempt, is perfectly reasonable and encouraged. However, if we were to say her mask in that episode symbolizes her being the mastermind behind the circus, hiding behind her masks, then you're losing the plot. I'm all for corn plating as long as we understand what the media we're analyzing is actually doing, not when we're trying to outsmart it by guessing its twists and turns, especially with Digital Circus being so straightforward. I know everyone wants some truth to be revealed in the finale, that actually the people in the circus are avatars of their real-world counterparts, they're figments of Jax's mind trying to deal with his trauma. But I think the unfortunate truth fans will have to accept is that what the show has presented us so far is the truth. Kinger worked at a company and built an AI that managed to trap people inside a virtual world via these VR goggles. Now they're stuck there. I'm sure we'll learn more about CNA or Scratch or how and why they started trapping people inside this virtual world over many years. But I think it'll be very straightforward because the show hasn't done anything that leads me to believe it's actually doing something fantabulously complex. But there is no reveal, no matter how grand, that will be enough for an audience that is already expecting such a huge reveal. Lost's finale suffered from the same problem, and look where that got it. This brings me to episode 7, whose very thesis is what I'm talking about. In episode 7, the beach episode, Kane crafts a whole adventure with the intention of showing the gang that they're better off staying in the circus.
You mean this was all...
An adventure! Yes!
That there's no point in wanting to leave. The reveal at the end of the episode isn't that there is a way to leave, it's that Kane can control and manipulate them to a degree they couldn't even fathom before that point. We learn that there is no easy escape. We learn Kane actually thinks he's doing a good job running the circus, think he can make all of the humans happy with his adventures, further emphasized by what he says at the start of episode 8.
I don't understand, Bubble. They want an exit, they want answers, they want something real. I give them an adventure that covers all of that, and they still hate it?
But, more than all of this, we learn Jax would rather stay in this digital hell forever than face the fact that he has done terrible things inside and potentially in the real world, and that he actually affected real people he cares about deep inside him. That he can't accept there's an escape because it'd mean his facade of not caring about anyone or anything is actually just a facade, and not justified by his current situation. Jax prefers not to care. These reveals are just further depth given to the characters of the show. They're not actually groundbreaking reveals that change the context of everything that came before, which is what audiences want. So, naturally, viewers decided that actually the whole point of the episode of Kane toying with them, thinking he's actually making them happy, of Kane being able to manipulate their minds, their wants and needs, is actually not true. And Abel is actually a real human, and Kane just pretended he made this adventure to hide the fact someone almost helped them escape.
I don't think that was actually a Kane adventure. Abel is a person. He's not an NPC. He's not a Kane creation, but Kane still has control over him.
Not to throw shade at this specific person, but a lot of viewers are missing some really great, albeit not very subtle, character writing in this show because they focus on theorizing. I think the show has this reputation of being this experimental, abstract, subtle show, so people go into it expecting that, but it's all so straightforward. Kinger doesn't have history with Abel, it's very clearly stated as such.
We met up with Abel. He says he was one of the original programmers and he knows how to shut off the game and free us.
Who?
The show isn't trying to pretend there's something deeper about Abel. The whole twist of the episode is that it was all fabrication, and if you engage with the show, the clues are there. The actual clues for the actual twist. Being that Kinger clearly doesn't know who Abel is, being that there's a bee drawn on Abel's map, being that there are 2 buttons where you make a choice on whether to leave the circus or not, which makes no sense. The show is what it is showing you. A group of people trapped in a digital world, forming connections and trying to find meaning in their lives, now that it's been stripped of meaning and purpose. About whether human connection is enough to make life worthwhile, even in its most depressing form. That's what the show is, and there's plenty of value in analyzing each small piece of the show and how it fits into that narrative. How it informs each character and develops and reveals things about them. Jack saying "you are my playthings" is not foreshadowing he's gonna become M after Kane's death. It is actually him pretending not to care about the people in the circus, because admitting he cares is admitting it's real, and admitting it's real is letting himself feel the feelings he's tried to repress this entire time at the circus, of loneliness and guilt and pain, of not fitting in and preferring death over caring about anyone, after he lost his only 2 friends. You see how focusing on theories makes you miss what the show is actually doing, right? Okay, I'm not gonna say this because I think the audience is dumb. I actually had the same impression for a while with this show. But I think a lot of people, especially those who have been fans of the show for a while, and before episode 7 especially, think this is a quirk chunga show where a group of characters go on wacky adventures in an episodic format, like a sitcom-style show, rather than a tightly written narrative drama similar to I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. I do get it. After watching the first few episodes of the show, especially episode 1, you assume it's an ensemble show, where each episode we get a wacky new adventure for a gang of characters to go through, but if you binge watch the show, you realize that it is very much serialized and not episodic. Kane himself wants to make their lives episodic, going from one adventure to the next, to please them and distract them from wanting to escape, but the narrative with this group of characters has them develop and evolve over time. But I think a lot of people are still stuck on the first idea of what the show is. Similar to episode 7's thesis about theories, episode 5 is itself an anthology, a collection of adventures from a suggestion box because the characters themselves have grown tired of Kane's. Exactly to showcase that the show wasn't going to be like that the adventures gimmick was not what the show was about. It's similar to The Good Place, which at first glance has the appearance of a quirky sitcom, but turns out to actually have an overarching narrative and a point to it. I was personally taken aback once I heard that Digital Circus would end with 1 season, as I still had the episodic idea of it in mind, but upon rewatch you realize the show is not episodic at all. Because of that, people treat the show as if it's meant to give equal time to each of its characters. The show, however, isn't that. The main characters of the show are Pomni and Jax, as much as misguided fans of the show would want that not to be the case.
No, that's gonna be fun.
Yeah, it's...
I'm gonna say something that may be event or something, but like, going into this series, I never expected one of the things that people would get mad at me for would be making the show focus on the 2 main characters. I was like, oh, I didn't even know you could get mad about that. It's like building up the show to be about Pomni and Jax. It's like, oh, people are actually really upset about that. I'm sorry.
I think maybe because I don't realize that Jax is like one of the 2 main characters, you know, because he gets introduced to like the group of 5, so it just seems like you're giving one of the other characters in the cast more attention than the other ones, and that might be...
I mean, I think people don't know where it's going, though.
Yeah.
I've seen people get mad about their predictions that just aren't true, and I'm like, oh, well, just hold out a little bit. Like, I swear, it's all for something.
I get it, honestly. My favorite characters of the show are also the side characters. Zubo is my favorite. But saying we need to focus on Ragatha, Zubo, or Gango in the finale because they haven't been developed yet is, for one, ignoring the very clear development they have gotten so far, but also misunderstanding the narrative of the show, because these are side characters, not characters who drive the plot. This is what I mean about the shape of the show, and how some fans refuse to acknowledge the show was different from what they thought it would be at first glance. It's emblematic of how fandoms see shows, as if they own the show and the characters, so they think they're owed screen time because they love a specific character. For one, screen time is not indicative of the quality of writing. A lot of characters can leave a mark and do a lot with very little screen time. Hannibal Lecter has 16 minutes of screen time in Silence of the Lambs, if you can believe it, and Anthony Hopkins won an Oscar for Best Leading Actor. Darth Vader has less than 45 minutes of screen time in the whole original trilogy. So a character not getting a lot of screen time doesn't necessarily mean that the writers are dismissing them or diminishing their role in the story. It's just a case-by-case basis on how characters can impact the story and develop with the necessary amount of screen time. However, online fandoms don't see shows like this. They see it as a competition between their favorite characters and the characters they hate, which works a little better with episodic shows, but with a serialized narrative like this, it was never going to be the case. This bleeds into infighting amongst the fandom, because the show is about a character like Jax, who is a bad person, and how he abuses and hurts the rest of the members of the circus, but people see that as a reason to hate the characters if he's a bad character, not just a bad person. Because of that, any amount of attention put on him is viewed as the show excusing and endorsing his shitty behavior, instead of the show just wanting to explore his character and psyche, and that being the whole crux of the narrative. Take this tweet, for example. This person is seemingly a Ragatha fan, but they want more screen time for Ragatha because they feel she hasn't completed her arc yet. Unless I'm completely mistaken, this is factually incorrect. Her arc was concluded in episode 6 after her talk with Kinger about being a people-pleaser and approaching Pomni to talk to her on Pomni's terms, instead of forcing herself onto Pomni as a crutch due to her fear of rejection. This is what I mean by missing the forest for the trees. People are so fixated on whether their theories are right or their faves get enough screen time that they're missing what the show is actually doing, even with their favorite characters. Not to mention, Jax is the character we know the least about, because he hides his feelings from everyone else. It's kind of his whole thing. So focusing on him in the finale, especially with flashbacks about his relationship with Ribbit, makes perfect sense. People think we already know enough, or even the most, about Jax because they've already filled in the blanks with their theories, their headcanon, when in actuality all we have is his personality and hints that something traumatic involving Ribbit made him this way. Meanwhile, we know Ragatha's backstory, we've practically seen it, we know how she ended up in the circus and even saw her arrive. Jax, however, we don't even know how he wound up in the circus. He's the only person not to open up at the bar besides Kinger, but that's beside the point because we know Kinger's deal from other episodes. But sure, we need more Ragatha screen time and Jax is stealing it away from her. It's backwards. This is another symptom of online fandoms. The same thing happens with so many other shows, like with people who hate Caitlyn in Arcane or Shauna in Yellow Jackets, and act as if they're better people than everyone else because of it. This relates to what I was talking about with the competition people come up with in their minds regarding which characters get more screen time, as characters who treat the fandom's faves badly end up suffering more from this, and Jax being Jax, everyone ends up hating him because he treats the whole cast like shit. Let's be very clear about this. I am not excusing Jax's actions as good or normal. He is a bully. He physically and mentally abuses the members of the circus, especially Gangle. He is not a good person. But he's also not this Hitler everyone makes him out to be. The thing is that a lot of people, especially those who care so much about their favorite characters, have this idea that the characters are somehow real people. That what Jax has done is basically torture real people, so liking him as a character means you're evil, who fans need to defend their faves from, as if they're not all part of the same show, the same narrative. There's often this thing with online fandom where people take a moral stance against the character, so they want them to suffer consequences in the story for being bad people, not understanding that a character being in a story doesn't mean the filmmakers endorse everything the character does. It'd be like complaining that the main character in Nightcrawler doesn't get his comeuppance by the end of the film. Or that the people who like the character may like them despite the bad things they do, or even because of them, as those things make them more interesting and complex characters. There's this self-righteous and moral grandstanding regarding characters who are flawed and do bad or evil things in media, as if people are so far above people like these characters, like they never fall down these same traps, not understanding that the appeal of these characters is that anyone can fall down these same pits these characters get themselves in, because they're all based on our humanity. When you deny humanity to these people who've done bad things, you deny your own ability to do bad things. As if you're a good person, so obviously you'd never do what this evil, awful character has done. The reason so many people like Jax is because he's by far the most interesting and complex character of the show, which is by design. He is the narrative, his refusal to accept his reality, him pushing people away because he's scared of being hurt, his feelings of inadequacy around people who learn to accept and love themselves for who they are because he can't love himself. So he plays the role of the bad guy because it's easier for him to make everyone hate him than accept the fact that he can be loved. That characterization is the whole crux of the narrative, as Pomni especially, but the whole cast too, shows they still care about him.
That includes you too.
Huh?
Listen, we're not gonna have you wandering off alone somewhere and abstracting or something. You're a pain in the ass, but you're still one of us.
That he still deserves love no matter how much he pushes the other characters away, or how much he hurts them. But then people reduce this, what the show is about, into the show being bad because the male character is the one the female main character cares about, despite other characters showing her appreciation. As if the other characters, Ragatha especially, are entitled to Pomni's friendship just because they're nice to her. I've seen people accuse Goose of writing Pomni as a misogynistic trope of a character, which is not allowing her own agency to just like someone who is flawed, just because they want Pomni to get along with Ragatha better, which diminishes the whole idea of the show. Saying Jax doesn't care about Pomni or the rest of the cast for that matter is just wrong. He pretends not to as a defense mechanism, as he clearly has trauma that has left him like this. But the thing with Ragatha is that her people-pleasing also does push people away.
I mean, she's nice to everyone.
I don't know. I think she tries way too hard. Like, we're stuck in... Why are you always pretending everything's always fine? Like, if you tell someone they're loved and appreciated every day, it just kind of loses all meaning.
There's nothing wrong with showing your negative emotions. That's pretty normal.
So she needs to overcome that before she can just be friends with Pomni, which, by the way, does happen, and they are now good friends who like each other after Ragatha's conversation with Kinger in episode 6. Side note, but there's this idea that so much character development in the show happens off-screen, with Zubo's body image issues, for example, which also isn't true, but this thing I've said about Ragatha and Pomni is one commonly cited as being resolved off-screen. But the resolution was in episode 6, with Ragatha talking to Kinger and allowing Pomni space to be herself, without Ragatha constantly trying to make sure everything's fine for her, so Ragatha can also make sure she's comfortable, not just always looking out for other people's comfort. Another case of people losing the bigger picture of what the show is doing because they're focusing on playing favorites with the characters, being oh so upset that Pomni teamed up with Jax and Ragatha in the beginning of episode 6. But there's this tendency to oversimplify the characters, which is ironic compared to what I said about the fans overcomplicating the plot of the show that is, in actuality, very simple and straightforward. So we end up getting people who don't even understand their favorite characters, who don't understand Jax especially, as if they're not equipped to understand complex characters, just wanting the show to be a quirky episodic adventure series with funny goofball characters. Similar to how people feel entitled regarding their favorite characters, the same thing happens with just the plot and show in general. I think mainly because the show took so long to release new episodes that people's interpretations and theories and fanfics sort of became the accepted canon of the show. Similar to not understanding the show is not episodic and that the main characters are Jax and Pomni, people started thinking their silly fan ideas were the correct way to view the show. Then their entitlement led to them being upset that the show didn't go the way they wanted it to. Recently, Goose made a tweet asking for feedback on her writing and directing of Digital Circus, which is an insane thing to do in my opinion. I talked about the entitlement of Digital Circus fans, but it makes them feel even more justified in their entitlement if you treat their feedback and opinions as actually relevant and valuable. Though obviously I'm not saying actual good criticism from people who are knowledgeable and understand writing and filmmaking is worthless. It can be very valuable. It's my whole thing. But this is especially crazy when most of these people are teenagers on Twitter upset at their favorite character not getting that much screen time. But the reason I mention this is because one of the tweets with feedback to her was this. I saw this and rolled my eyes because this isn't a writing mistake, but it gets even worse when you see the person's reasoning. Not only are they treating a deliberate writing choice as an unintended mistake, but the reason for it being bad is that it made fan art non-canon. This is insane and perfectly emblematic of what I said about entitlement. I've never seen someone who takes fan art as canon, but it's exactly what I said about people taking their fanon interpretations as canon. The reason behind the decision to make them never leave the circus is because of what it implies about our cast. They're all terrified of leaving the familiarity of the circus, and they don't want to explore outside their circus because they genuinely don't want to be there. I understand the whole thing of them wanting a distraction so they'd go outside the circus and explore, but not only is the circus itself huge, with plenty of places to explore inside there alone. The cast doesn't treat the circus as a place where they actually are. They don't treat it as real. They still see it as if they'll find a way to leave the circus, so exploring outside the circus area would be acknowledging that this is real, and they are really trapped in this place with no escape. It's a deliberate choice by Goose, not an unintended consequence. Not to mention, the line from Kane isn't that they never have gone outside the circus.
I don't know, why don't you guys hang out at the Digital Lake? These locations have just kinda been there this whole time. Not sure why you never visit them.
Just that they never do, which does mean they could have gone out there once or twice, but just don't do it as a habit. If you're ever gonna analyze media, you need to look at it as if everything about the piece of media is intentional. Then see what kind of picture it forms regarding its themes and story with that in mind. Don't think it's stupid that they did it like that. I bet they didn't even do that on purpose. Think, why did they do it like that? But fans think a lot of the story is unintentional despite everything that Goose has said. The Amazing Digital Circus is Gooseworx' baby.
I'm having a baby.
It is the story she wanted to tell, her way of expressing herself through art. Every character has a piece of her inside. This is what TV and movies are. They're expressions of people's feelings and experiences that hopefully relate to people. They're not products to be used for endless consumption, satisfying the customer by adding new moments of their favorite characters because otherwise fans will be sad. People don't see that the media they experience wasn't made for them, that it was made for its creators. So they lose sight of what makes art what it is. There's this sense, since people see art as a product, that the consumer, the customer, is always right. So shows need to cater to them. No art has to cater to anyone, and it's very entitled to think it does. Viewers need to understand that the art they experience only exists because the people who made it wanted to say something. A piece of art, like the Amazing Digital Circus, isn't yours to impose yourself upon, make demands of, or control. It's the artist's, Goose's, to do with as they please. And if you don't like what the artist is doing with their art, nobody's forcing you to stick around or endorse it. You are simply a fan of the creation, you are not the creator. And if you do want such control of a creation, then by all means create something. I'm even a big advocate for fanfiction. I read it a lot and I even write some. All that said, again, to be absolutely clear, there is a world of difference between genuine constructive criticism that has the intent of helping the artist better achieve their vision and admonishing something because it doesn't suit your personal preference. I'll probably make a whole video about this topic eventually. All of what I said is a symptom of online fandom. It happens even with more adult shows like Yellow Jackets, but it is very clearly exacerbated by the fact the show's aesthetic is very childish, which is obviously part of Goose's narrative, of making these real adult humans be stuck in a sexless, childish world with no escape, but has attracted people who are clearly way too young to engage with a show that clearly has adult themes and complex characters. Maybe if the show had worded children away more, a bit more explicit in some areas, then it could have been received by people who could appreciate its narrative more, instead of film theory fans, which has also caused the show to be perceived as this childish, baby version of an adult story, quite literally baby's first Twin Peaks, as if the audience being young means that the show itself can't be smart or thoughtful.
And I was watching these on my Discord server the other day. It's something. It's peeking into the YouTube Kids territory of YouTube a bit there, which is a bit concerning. But
interesting.
I've tried to stay away from the younger audiences with my work, just because I feel like I can understand. At this age, I probably would have been all over this. Although I generally don't think any. I think it goes without saying that kids on the internet, it's totally forgivable. We were all there at one point, but once you're a bit older, you start to see how kind of annoying it can become when it sort of almost feels like your work is being appropriated in a way. But I think the thing I don't love about it is it's not like when kids are loving something like this, like that's not bad. That's like me being obsessed with Portal when I was 7. Like that's an honor, really. But the negative side there is when it sort of your series, like this happened with FNAF, sort of then gains the connotation of being like a cringe kids series, and it sort of falls into that category.
I think
so.
That
thankfully,
makes sense.
I think I've been steering straight so far, and I don't think I've fallen down that chasm yet, or at least not mostly. So hopefully I can stay away from that, since I feel like I'm going in places with the concepts here that might be a little bit more convoluted than most 7-year-olds will be following, but I don't know. If anyone who wants to watch it is welcome to watch it.
This, in turn, makes the critics of the show as annoying as the fans, as they see the show as beneath them because it appeals to a younger, less developed audience. So, with all that said, I'm pretty confident that the Amazing Digital Circus finale will be good, but a large contingent of the fans will not like it regardless. Their mind is already made up about it, even if they themselves don't realize it, because fans already seem to turn on the show just based on seeing the poster and trailer for the finale, especially with how much they feature Jax, and because they're expecting some sort of grand reveal that the show hasn't really given any indication will actually occur. I don't see much of a way for Goose to win and satisfy the, hopefully, minority of fans I've talked about given all I've said. So, if you're one of those fans, I implore you to consider all that I've said and be a little more thoughtful. And if you're not one of those people, brace for impact.